Hey everyone, it's Robin Riley for Bello's Designs. Welcome to my video tutorial. Today I'm going to show you how I created this Halloween gift card holder. Doesn't look like much, but to be honest, what makes this really sweet is that the little pumpkin in the center actually moves. He's on a wobble. We'll talk about that when we get to that point. Before I go any further, though, with the supply list, I want to take a minute to invite you to our Facebook groups. We have two of them. We have the Bello's Design Lounge. There is where we showcase all of the Lavinia products. We also have a second page, which is called the Bello's Design a la carte. That's the page where we showcase all the other products like Cardio's, Sweet Poppy, Nellie's. So post your pictures there to share all of your creations with all of us. We are on other social media platforms such as Instagram, Pinterest, and TikTok. And to find us there, all you have to do is search hashtag Bello's Designs. Okay, let's get started with the materials that I used to create this cute little card so that you could place gift cards, maybe money, into it. Okay, first I'll be starting with a piece of white card that measures 4 inches by 5.5 inches, and it will be scored at the 2 3/4 inch mark. The stamps that I'm using today are from the new Lavinia release. I'll be using Burst of Stars, LAV 822. Playful Pumpkin, LAV 821. Ickle Pumpkins, LAV 828. And I will just be using this little guy on the right. An ickle is a term that is used in England. Actually, it's referred to as baby talk when you're speaking to a little child, and it means little. And lastly, I will be using this little sprig from the Flower Pots set, LAV 826. The inks that I'll be using today, for the background, I'm using the Elements Graphite along with Elements Bermuda. Now, for the little pumpkins, I am using the colors Sahara, Russet Orange, and Olive. And all the stamping will be done in VersaFine Clair Nocturne, with the exception that the little floral piece that I used here, I actually used the Bermuda ink for that. Now, other supplies that you're going to need will be some Sweet Poppy low-tack tape. Also, I am going to be using a water pen brush because I'm going to use the Elements inks to paint onto the pumpkins. I will be using an orange watercolor pen, which what I used that for was to darken the little bumps that are on the pumpkin. That's optional. You don't have to do that. I'm using a black fine liner. And to do that, for that, I just outlined the mouth. And I'm using a white gel pen to add some highlights, along with a Sharpie. And I'll explain the use of the Sharpie as we go on. You will need some scrap paper to stamp your pumpkins, the large one and the 2 small ones. You will need some scissors. I call these my fussy cutting scissors, something that's small and sharp. You will need a scoreboard. Mine is pretty old and large, along with a bone folder. And if you don't have a scoreboard, that's okay. You can actually just fold it in half. I will be using one of the Cardio acrylic stamp It's not a block, okay? But it's really fun to use when you're using small stamps. This is the wobble piece. I will provide a link in the description as to where you can purchase these. It's just a little piece of plastic. Hopefully you can see there's like a spring in the middle. There's adhesive on both sides. You just peel it and stick it. And you can actually make these. I've seen people make them on their own out of paper, but I just prefer this because it is definitely more sturdy. I will be using Art Glitter Designers Dry Clear Adhesive. And I believe the last thing that I am going to be using will be my Misty stamping tool. If I left anything out along the way, I will let you know. And always check under the description section of this video and you will see everything listed as far as what I'm using. Okay, let's get started. So for the background, using that 4" by 5.5" piece of card, and this is just plain card. This is not watercolor card. You most definitely could use watercolor card, but it's not necessary. And I'm going to do the dip and dab method to create this background. Dip and dab, that's a term from Eileen Godwin. I love it, and I've just stuck to it. So what I'm doing is I'm taking my graphite ink, placing it on my mat. Now, you can actually see the outline of that pad, and I don't want that to really appear on my card. So by adding enough water, and this is just plain water, I'm going to get a molted effect, and you can add as much as you want. And then what you're going to do is just dip and dab your paper into that water. And you see how you'll get this crazy looking design. So you do this as much or as little as you want to create a nice molted background. I'm going to just clean off the excess here. And I'm going to dab off the excess water. Now, if this were watercolor card, I probably wouldn't dab it, and I would just allow it to dry on its own because you get a really neat effect if you do that. Now, this is rather wet. What I suggest you do is let this air dry on its own, whether you're using regular paper or watercolor paper. But for the purpose of today, I'm going to take a quick second and give it a blast from my heat tool. And the reason I'm doing this is I do not want my next color to blend that much into this graphite. Okay, that's going to be it for today, but please take your time and let yours dry thoroughly. The other thing, when you're not using watercolor paper, if you don't allow it to dry thoroughly, you'll get some raised areas, which is really, there's nothing wrong with that. I think that adds just another bit of dimension, but it's just best to let it dry on its own. Now, for the next layer, I'll use the Bermuda. Same idea, just tapping it onto my work surface, applying some water, and I'm just going to dip and dab a little bit here and there until I am happy with the amount of color on the card. And I think we'll stop there. Again, you want to let this dry thoroughly before you continue. Even if you're using watercolor paper, you may get a little bit of a bend in your paper, so I suggest you lay it under something heavy, like a heavy book or a stack of books to flatten it. Just makes it a lot easier when it comes time for stamping. Okay, so I'm going to set this aside and let it dry. I have already created another background using those same two colors. This is totally dry. And what I did, I used my scoreboard And at the 2 3/4 inch mark, I made a score line. Now, if you don't have a scoreboard, all you simply need to do is fold your card in half and create a nice seam with a bone folder. If you don't have a bone folder, the side of a pen will do just as well. So here we have the beginning of our card. Now, what we want to do is decide which side do we want to decorate on. And I think I'm going to go with this side here just because, no special reason. Before I do my stamping, though, I'm going to use the Sweet Poppy tape. And I am going to just run a piece of this tape along that seam that I created. This is going to keep me from getting any stamps on the back side of the card. See what I mean? So I'm going to leave this open, though, while I do the stamping. So using my MISTI, I'm going to get my stamps on first. I'm just lining this up with the grid that's provided on my sticky mat beneath. And I need to remind myself, this is the area that I'm stamping. This is the back of the card. All right, I'm going to start first with that burst of stars. Placing it just randomly in the background. Not the entire stamp is going to fit, and that's fine. That's going to work just perfectly. So I'm using the VersaFine Clair Nocturne for this. And I'm going to put a nice layer of ink just by tapping that ink over the stamp. And I have a little here I want to wipe off. Pressing firmly onto that card. And I should have a nice imprint in the background of those stamps. Now, as far as cleaning my stamps, I use a microfiber towel along with just plain water. You don't need any type of cleaner. It's actually best not to use any cleaner. Just use this water, and a microfiber works well because it doesn't leave any lint behind. You don't want to get lint on your stamps because that just causes marks that you don't want. Okay, now that that's on there, I am going to simply remove this at this point because I'm going to work on scrap paper for my other stamps. So let me grab a piece of scrap here and get that in my, got one too many, get that into my MISTI. The scrap is a little bit large, but that's okay. Using this cute little playful pumpkin, I'm going to stamp one. I don't have to worry about it being perfectly straight because I'm going to be cutting this guy out. And I'm going to add my VersaFine Nocturne just by tapping to make sure I get a nice dark image. Pressing and holding it there for a couple seconds. There we go. Now, I don't know if you can see, but the eyes aren't super dark, but that's okay because I'm going to use my marker to color those in. Now, what you could do is restamp if you don't want to take the time to color it in with the marker. But for me, the marker tends to make it a lot darker, and I'm happier with that look. Now, the next stamp is going to be one of the Ickles, the one with the eyes. The other one is cute. It's just like a little house. So I need two of these. So I'm going to stamp them twice. Again, this is just scrap paper. I don't have to worry about it being even or straight because these are going to be cut out. All right, there's one. And I need a second one. Oh, that's a good ghost print, but that's a little too light for what I need. So I'm going to just get that re-inked. And there we go. Now we have all 3 of the little pumpkins that we need. Cleaning off my stamp here. Okay, now the next step is going to be coloring or painting in. And again, you can use whatever kind of method you want. If you want to color with markers, color with markers. I'm going to use the Element inks, and I am going to go ahead and just paint these. And I'm going to actually set this particular set aside because before I paint them, I want to make sure they're 100% dry. Now, this ink does dry quickly, but for today's purposes, I had already stamped one out, and yesterday actually, so I know that it is super dry. So this is how I'm going to be painting. I'm going to use a watercolor brush, which has water in the base. You just fill it simply by unscrewing the cap. You fill it, screw it back on. And you just gently press here when you're holding it down to release the water. Now I'm going to use an acrylic block to put my ink on. I don't know if that's going to make it easier or harder for you to see, but let's give it a go. So the first color I'm going to use is the Sahara. I'm going to just squeeze a small drop of water here on the side and mix it in to that ink. And this creates a nice watercolor. I always start with the lightest color first, and I'm going to apply a quick light coat of this color. Now, not using watercolor paper, as I said, this is just plain white paper. So you have to be careful not to add too much water because you will get some peeling of your paper. And we really don't want that much peeling, even though it does add interest. But in this area, I really don't want it. The other thing, you can see how sloppy I was. Doesn't matter that I'm coloring outside the lines because I'm going to cut this. So it's going to be fine. Now, in between each layer, I do clean off my brush simply by squeezing some water out onto a towel and wiping it off. Now, you need to let each layer dry also. So I'm going to give this a quick blast. Now, this isn't going to be 100% dry, but for our purposes, it'll be okay. Next color will be the russet orange. Add some to my acrylic block. I'm going to squeeze out a little bit of water. Mix it in. And this is when I begin to add my layers. Now, what I want to do is focus on those areas. As you can see, there's these really fine darkened areas that provide shadowing. So that's where I'm going to add this russet orange. Again, I don't have to be too careful about staying in the lines because I am going to be cutting this out, like I said. So I continue going around, hitting those shadowed areas. Then I'm just going to use a little bit of water, just plain water, and I want to try to blend this in a tad bit. And these inks do blend well. Using a paper towel, I can soak up some of the extra water. Now, I will continue on adding layer after layer of orange until I get the depth of color that I would like. The last color I would add will be the green. This is the olive. Again, just a little bit of water. Then I can paint the stem. And I can even add some green into the pumpkin itself. I personally like the multicolored pumpkins, and that's what I tend to buy every year. So you continue doing this until you get the color combination and the shades that you like. Now, let me clean off my pen just a little bit. Slide this to the side. Now look, there's a lot of ink there, right? It's a shame to waste that. So this is what I like to do. I spritz water. I always have a pile of ATC cards laying at my desk. These measure 2.5 inches by 3.5 inches. So instead of wasting that ink, I come in and I pick up the ink and start to create ATC cards. This will be a cute one for fall because of the color combination. And again, look, I still have so much ink. So I can go on, dip and dab, and pick up these colors. And I don't feel as bad as, I don't feel as if I'm wasting my ink when I do this. So keep a stack of these to the side and then use them up. And then you'll have these great backgrounds to play with if you like to make ATC cards, which I really do. Okay, let me clean this off, get some of the water out of the way. Now, I've already done my pumpkin. I already have him colored with the inks. It's already dried. I used the black marker. Here, I'll bring in the one that's still a little bit wet. But all I do is I take that black marker and I go over those eyes to make them deeper. Now, you can use a paintbrush in your ink and watercolor it just like I did the rest of the pumpkin if you don't have a black marker. But this is a quick way to get a nice darkened eye. With the fine liner, I went in and I traced his mouth to make it pop a little bit more. Okay. Then with that orange watercolor marker, I went in and I colored a few of those bumps, the little warty looking things. Okay, these are looking so dark, but it's because this paper is still wet. I colored mine in once they were dry. Now, I added some white using the gel pen for some highlights. And let's look at the original stamp. When I cut this out, as you can see, there's no way I'm going to be cutting out that squiggly line. And there's a white circle there. So what I did is I took that graphite ink. I have that water pen here. And I just dabbed some of that graphite ink in that circle. Being that that's what my background is on my card, that white circle won't stand out as much. So I like to use these fine tip scissors. They're called cutter bees. And I did all the trimming. Now, once my trimming is done, I take that black marker again. And if there are areas where white, like I get a white edge or whatever from cutting, I just run the marker on that edge to cover up the white areas. When something is this fine and detailed, it's almost impossible to get a perfect cut on the line. So by just using this marker, and take your time doing that, you can add that darkened edge back in. Now, I already went ahead, so you didn't have to watch me color and paint these pumpkins. So I have all three ready to go. So let me bring my card back in. I can actually remove the tape because I'm done with the stamping. And now what I'm going to do is simply place the pumpkins where I think they're going to go. And I want them to be a little dimensional, like hiding behind each other. So I bring in my glue and I'm going to just adhere the small ones first. I like this type of glue because of the fine tip that it has, and I can get into those fine areas. So see when I say I colored that little circle gray, that way it doesn't look like it's like popping off the page. All right, let me move this guy over just a little bit. going to put him in the corner. All right. So then when my larger pumpkin goes on, these two will be behind. Now let me show you how I use this wobble. So the wobble has two sides. One is solid, one is open. I use the solid side onto the card itself and the open side onto the element, which is going to be my pumpkin. So this has a peel-off piece, and it's sticky underneath. But what I like to do is always add a few drops of glue. First, the reason being that it makes it movable if I don't get it positioned instantly. Plus, it's just another level of security for holding on. So I'm just going to place that on the back of the pumpkin, give it a nice press. I can slide it a little bit because of that glue, so I can get it centered better. And then this back piece, you peel off, same way. Now, here we go. It does have a split in it, so that does help with peeling that piece off, but sometimes they're tricky. All right, that's good. And again, I'm just going to add a few drops of that glue so that I have a little bit of movement. Gives me a few seconds to move it. And then I know it's going to be adhered well. So I'm just going to press that down in place. I hold it for a few seconds just so I make sure that I get some good adhesion. And there he is. Now I don't want to play with it too much because the glue is still wet, but you can see what a cute element that adds. Now the last few things we have to stamp, one being that little floral element. And I'm using this one, but gosh, any of those would work perfectly. They're really cute. And I'm going to use the acrylic stump here. I do like using these. And the Bermuda ink. I'm just going to tap that into the ink and then randomly place these along the edge. And I vary the direction that I'm placing this down. I just want to create some interest in these corners. It's hard to get a second generation of stamping when you're using elements, even though I continue to try. So as you can see, I'm just getting the tip here. Got a little ink on the edge here. Got to be careful. So much potential with these little floral bits. I love it. Now, the last thing I'm going to stamp is the word boo. Now, this is a stamp that I had in my collection from many moons ago. So if you have that stamp that says boo, great. If not, maybe you have another Halloween word, or you could simply write this in. So tapping this into that versifying Claire, pressing that into place, and now I have boo. Now let me show you with that fine liner. What I can do if I want is to add some additional squiggles to that stem that is on the background, kind of finishing it off. I don't know if you can see that, just a couple squiggles, similar to what the stamp actually has. Now this guy doesn't get that. No way to do that there. Basically, that is it, folks. It's that simple to create. And now you have a perfect card for you to place a gift card inside. And you can, I saw on Amazon, you can buy envelopes in this size for, and all you need to do is look up gift card envelopes. They are super cheap. And boy, that'd be just perfect. So you don't have to make your own. Now, you could really go crazy and add some stickles or add some shiny elements to this, maybe use glitter pen to dress this up. But I think it's a perfect little fun card. You know, if you're giving out gift cards like we have in our local fast food places, they have a lot of Halloween coupons that you can get really cheap, like for drinks. And I like to give those out to kids in my neighborhood. So this would be a perfect way to do it. I could slip that little coupon in here or the gift card into a little envelope and add that to their treat bags. So I hope I showed you something a little bit different as far as creating. The wobble is just a great effect to add to any of your cards. And I think these pumpkins are perfect to play with that wobble. Remember, I'll have that in the description below for you. If you decide to make anything like this, how about posting it in our groups? Tag me, because I'd love to see what you come up with. And have fun. This one's simple and so much fun. Hey, I'll see you in the next one. Take care, and thanks for watching. Bye-bye.